So, my channel is usually pretty Loona-centric, with occasional mentions of other groups, and I doubt it was expected this would be the first group I actually devoted a whole video to outside of that. So, I'm working on a couple of videos, and in one of them, namely my stan and anti-list, I made the joke the most interesting thing about RIIZE is the way SM is hell-bent on punishing that one dude seunghan. Then, 3 days ago, it was announced Seunghan's involuntary prison sentence had ended, that is to say, he was coming off hiatus. So I was bummed because I couldn't make that joke anymore. And then... yeah, they just booted the dude from the group 2 days later. Oh, sorry, he voluntarily chose to leave, wink wink nudge nudge. So, if you're not caught up on what's been happening with Hong Seunghan, he was supposed to be a member of that new SM boy group RIIZE that debuted in 2023. RIIZE had been a thing for all of like 2 minutes before images started to circulate of his pre-idol life online, including the most grievous of sins, such as having a girlfriend and smoking, something literally every second person on the Stam planet does as a teenager. Korea can be absolutely dumb about stuff like this, so when it was announced he'd go on hiatus, I wasn't exactly shocked. Like, they forced that one team off of peak time for the crime of being photographed hanging out with the opposite sex, so this trend is well established, and only last year, aespa's Karina was forced to write a handwritten apology for having a boyfriend. It's stupid and it's unreasonable, but it's what Korean fans do. Allegedly, RIIZE are actually really popular overseas. I say allegedly because every K-pop act's fandom likes to claim that shit nowadays, even if 95% of their sales are in Korea. And apparently some form of boycott due to Seunghan's forced hiatus was already happening, but I wasn't aware of it. Now though, there are actual serious threats of boycott happening over this latest fuckery. Now, typically I wouldn't care because it's SM and anyone from that big-ass company is privileged above the likes of us plebeians anyway. But to give you the scoop that I was only recently made aware of, that particular subset of Korean fans that have been reacting so poorly to Seunghan having an actual life before debuting as an idol have been acting, legitimately demented. Like, this is behavior that you thought was the stuff of old scary stories they tell from the Super Junior era. Aside from the stalking, harassment, generally hateful behavior that includes threats to him and his family, Seunghan, who I remind you is only 21, was also sent goddamn funeral wreaths. Like, actual funeral wreaths, set up outside the building he works in response to SM's announcement of him coming back. Mind you, October 13th is the date that Sully committed suicide, so people figured, hey, maybe we're jumping the gun, and that's actually what they're for. But some non-insane RIIZE fans got up close and determined that, no, those are no joke actually addressed to Seunghan. Fucking crazy and sinister as hell. Like, this kind of reads as a death threat, and there were reportedly over 1,000 of these things, alongside protest trucks blasting hateful messages erected outside the SM building. At this point, with stalkerish anti-fans behaving so freaking hysterically and going to these lengths to harass Seunghan out of RIIZE, which, yes, is the entire point from their own mouths, there is some serious concern being thrown around about the possibility of serious mental health repercussions in Seunghan, because after all, unchecked harassment has led to idols killing themselves before. Even aside from all the psychotic behavior from so-called fans, a lot of ire is building in international fans towards SM Entertainment, who after all are allowing this to happen. SM have always been pussies that kowtow exclusively to the whims of the exact fans they should not treat with any seriousness, but now it's getting extreme, and in this day and age it's not acceptable. A real fan war is on the horizon between fans who act rational and fans who believe idols should be punished for daring to be real people. And even if that hadn't happened, the very idea of it is just kind of a slap in the face. Making him sit out of his own group and a shot at fame for 10 straight months, then finally allowing him back only to negotiate his removal from the group a day later? That's a sort of audacity you just can't stand. It's a terrible, manipulative, and callous way to treat an idol who is already going through the SM ringer. So now we have some talks going around. Could a boycott serve as an effective response to all this bullshit? People began citing Orbitz, who successfully freed Loona from BlackBerry Creative's abusive grasp, and have been calling for similar efforts. So this begs the obvious question, could this actually work? This is not the first time people have taken influence from Orbitz after their highly impactful 2022-2023 boycott. 50/50's overseas fanbase took similar measures, creating a fan union and refusing to attract any streams, revenue, or support in response to the abuses Sena, Aaron, Seo, and Kina went through and the reputational damage they suffered for Attract's greed. This particular example is not exactly influential since it's happening to a group and CEO that never really got big enough to matter. Cupid was one of the biggest K-pop hits ever to grace the music industry, but the lawsuits and extended legal drama occurring so soon into any headway the group could have made with its success meant that Attract had basically cooked their goose before the matter was even settled. And although harebrained domestic fans pledged allegiance to the CEO and promised to support his new version of 50-50, odds are that really isn't going to go anywhere anyway. There's still some purpose to it, in that being loud enough about the matter can make standing new Attract ventures too much of a headache to deal with, but there's not a lot of immediate means of getting one back for 50-50. But what about RIIZE? RIIZE are an SM group, their famed million-seller debut group, and were hyped at least partially as part of an upcoming NCT unit before it was determined they would form their own group. They were another one of those groups SM has been hyping as global, and just oh so popular in the West, clearly fanning the flames of that Western money they want so badly. Their fan base, while newer than their peers, is still more dry and stable than the likes of 50-50, and it's fair to say that the repugnant way that SM has treated seunghan has gotten the attention of fans across the K-pop sphere, even those who weren't interested in RIIZE before. So could there be some weight for fans to leverage against SM? To make the case for a successful boycott, you have to determine the goals, and this is where fans have an advantage. I, personally, being an anti-capitalist and watching the K-pop industry get sicker and more abusive each passing week, am of the belief that any boycott is a good boycott, and any chance to create one should be taken. But even outside that fairly radical stance, fans making enough noise could be worth it to stick it to SM, even if no direct, tangible goal is achieved. The most obvious goal is the return of seunghan. This is one of the hardest to conceive actually happening. Seunghan was put on hiatus for 10 months and only lasted a day back in the group before SM let him go, so I doubt they're willing to risk more headache just to bring him back. It would have to mean enduring an even greater headache for keeping him out of the group. But I don't think it's impossible. Having said that, there are other more feasible goals. Detriment to RIIZE's brand due to fan hostility could have potential waves back at SM. Remember, Orbits didn't just decide to be really loud about Loona's grievances back when Chuu was kicked out. They collectively decided to starve Blockberry of money and attention so that the Loona brand would become worthless to them unless their demands were met. This went off without a hitch, and Blockberry ran out of funds to sue the girls with in under a year. Forcing the cessation of RIIZE's activities, or even simply making them a great deal less profitable, could be an effective tool to get SM to play ball. Remember how JYP tried to double down on nmixx's hideously received O.O concept with Dice, but when it threatened the group's success too much, he relented and changed the sound to something that actually worked? Yeah, there is precedent for it. This is less likely to see the drastic results experienced by Blockberry, who lost 98% of their pre-orders from one release to the next, thanks to the boycott, but there's still a lot of potential fan money to be lost. Even without making the RIIZE brand worthless, RIIZE as a brand have much further to fall than Loona or 50-50, and SM tend to be very receptive to the loss of funds. If this tactic did get severe enough, of course, there's always the possibility RIIZE disband or leave SM entirely. This is the least likely effect of a potential boycott, and it's determinant on several conditions that haven't been met, but I still think it's something to strive for. The Loona boycott didn't turn serious until the other members of Loona as one whole sued for contract termination, making it clear they were in it for the long haul with Chuu and were not happy at Blockberry. If seunghan and the remaining RIIZE members made noise to this effect, let alone actually went as far as to sue, it could galvanize fans the same way. On the downside, SM has a lot more money to burn than Blockberry and have been known to be vindictive to a ridiculous degree towards any act that terminates their contract, unofficially blacklisting any act they want to punish from the industry. This is a hazard of defying SM that is always present, and could serve as a deterrent towards causing trouble. However, I think it's fair to say that SM's blacklisting power has waned in recent years. They're not the top dog anymore by a long shot, and there's other places to go if performing spaces or entertainment circuits too beholden to SM toe their line. Their leverage isn't 100%. Conversely, disbanding and reuniting under a different name could be very beneficial to RIIZE. This is another pioneering feature of Loona and Orbits. Before 2022, K-pop acts that got famous have been known to start up again under different companies or different names or both, but they almost never achieved the incredible success and fame they had before. Loona, however, have seen great returns as artms and loossemble as well as soloists. Their success has remained largely intact, and they stand a real chance of having the same fame as before, if not greater. If this is any indication that the same is possible for RIIZE, then the typical pitfalls of redebuting aren't so steep, and they can afford to do so. Of course, even if none of this happens, it can be said that just damaging SM's revenue enough could be a satisfactory goal on its own. If SM boots seunghan and finds that they ran into catastrophic damages to their profits that they weren't prepared for, it could force them to rethink the situation and be more protective of their artists in the future, and not be such slaves to the whims of the worst kinds of K-pop fans. Any change from their current position is a good one. To be frank, the chance to unite K-pop fandom like this is one that shouldn't be missed no matter how successful it is in the end. We've seen both through the Orbit boycott and the success of unrelated boycotts like BTS that boycotting not only works, it gets very good results if you commit to it. Which is going to be the biggest challenge going forward. K-pop is a hierarchy, a caste system, and none of the negative aspects of the industry have a real chance at changing unless this level of fan outrage actually hits a big four group for a change. If RIIZE's fans want to make an effort for seunghan and RIIZE against SM and their army of entitled stalkers, it will require a concerted effort from a lot of parties and a standing, unwavering commitment towards making RIIZE unsuccessful and unprofitable. I admit that last part is what makes all of this a long shot. I'm sure I could make a whole video just on this fact, but fans of Big Four groups are often not fans of those groups at all, but fans of the company. A decent chunk, possibly even a majority of fans that describe themselves as diehards for groups like aespa, babymonster, Stray Kids, or newjeans, let alone BTS, don't actually like those groups or their music, but like the clout. They like the air of success, and they like the big numbers and the trophies and the sold-out tours, and they like holding it over those that have less. This feature of K-pop fandom has been strangling healthy enjoyment of music in that sphere for years, and it's why fandoms like that can never, ever pull off a boycott. They can't commit. They don't have a real attachment, so they don't make a real commitment, and will let the idols suffer if it means they can still rake in accolades. In order for a RIIZE boycott to be successful, their fans will have to be prepared to think like Orbits and do what Orbits did, which was put their foot down and say, you know what, if we can't have Loona without them being abused and silenced, then we just won't have Loona. It's a tough decision, but it will be necessary. My personal recommendation towards RIIZEs, as I'm pretty sure they're called, is that they get in contact with Loona's and 50/50's fan unions for advice on creating their own and moving forward with it, as well as tactics to deny SM revenue. May fortune be with you, fellow K-pop fans.